All right, so now we're going to talk about muscle fibers. What I'm going to do, the first part of the lecture is actually a review of anatomy like usual. So we'll skip that and we'll move right on to section C, which is motor units. Okay, so this is a couple slides into the presentation. A motor unit is a single motor neuron in all the muscle fibers it innervates. Okay, so when you contract a motor unit. Okay, you can't like do half a motor unit. The motor unit is the single smallest thing you can actually control. Okay, when we talk about the graded contractions, we talk about the different number of motor units. You can either have one, you can have two. Like when you recruit more fibers to contract, what you're recruiting is more motor units. Okay, so the neuromuscular junction is where the neuron makes muscle fiber. The motor end plate is the area of the muscle fiber where the motor neuron stimulates it using acetylcholine. Okay. Okay. So that's the motor end plate where all the magic happens, basically. Okay. Okay. So the contraction strength comes from motor unit recruitment. So if I'm lifting something light, then I'm only using a few motor units. The more I lift, the more motor units I recruit. Okay. Finer muscle control requires smaller motor units because you need to just have more sensitivity and touch. Okay, eye muscles may have 23 fibers per motor unit. Larger, stronger muscles have thousands of motor units per muscle fiber. Okay, control and strength are trade-offs. So every time I have more control, I have significantly less strength. Okay, humans have a lot of motor units, therefore we don't have a lot of strength. That's why a lot of animals are much stronger than we are. Okay, so we'll pick on, someone like Mauricio, for example. He looks like a pretty strong guy, but I can put him in a room with a 90-pound chimpanzee and bet on a chimpanzee that the chimpanzee is stronger, and that's simply because his motor units are bigger, so the chimpanzee has less control, but he has much more strength. Okay. Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Basically, this is a genetic mutation that causes muscles to not build up. So what actually ends up happening is you have muscles that are eventually replaced by fibrous connective tissue and fatty tissue, and those don't contract. So you eventually lose control. Okay. All right. So this, okay. This is muscle contraction. So you should already know where all the units are, where everything is. And if you need explanation, you can watch the anatomy lecture provided, or they should have explained that in previous chapters. Okay. Okay. So here is muscle contraction. So here, I like this slide because I think this slide explains all of it. Okay, so this is normal relaxation as the sliding filament theory works. Okay, the myosin doesn't actually move but pulls the actin toward the center. So eventually the H zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller until the H zone disappears. Okay, the Z discs on either side get closer and closer together. Okay. And the H zone, like I said, the H zone disappears, the actin filaments move toward one another. Okay. Okay. Okay, cross bridges. Okay, so this you should understand. So now let's get into more of the physiology of it all. Okay, I'm sure you guys all know muscle contractions are caused by ATP. Okay, so I'm gonna start off by ignoring the triple myosin and troponin first. Okay, so what happens is the myosin head, okay, will grab onto the ATP, or takes ATP, it grabs on, the ATP splits, right? That's releases the energy, and that causes the muscle contraction. Okay, and then you need to put a new ATP on for it to fall off and pull. So all the way through, it keeps using ATP. Okay. Okay. So I want you to think about a certain situation. After you die, your muscles will go into something called rigor mortis. Okay, you become a stiff. That's where the term stiff actually comes from, right? So, and that makes the muscles like really, really tight. Okay, think about where or when this actually happens. Okay, the answer is this stage right here. Okay, this. After you die, you eventually run out of ATP. You need ATP, you need fresh ATP to unhook the myosin from the actin. If you don't have ATP, this doesn't happen. So you stay this. This is the muscle partially contracted and it doesn't let go. So this is rigor mortis. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the control of myosin contraction or myosin actin interaction. And now I'm going to get into the troponin and the triple myosin. Okay. I think that my anatomy textbook has a better drawing of this, where there's little holes on the actin. The little holes on the actin are where the myosin actually binds. You can't see the little holes right now because they're covered by the triple myosin. Okay, so the triple myosin attaches to the actin myosin binding site, so it prevents the myosin from binding to the actin. Okay, but you have the troponin complex on top of it. Okay, what signals muscle contraction is a release of calcium from the sarcolemma, okay, or the sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay? What that generates is the movement, okay? So when calcium binds to the troponin pulls the triple myosin off, and therefore the myosin is free to attach to the actin head. Okay, so I always like to think of the troponin as a little guard dog, okay, and the calcium as, you know, steak. You release the steak, the guard dog runs away to eat the steak. The myosin has a job, can pull on the actin. Okay. Okay. So that's the sarcoplasmic reticulum that releases the calcium. Notice it's spread basically all over the cell. Okay. All right. Okay. So stimulating the muscle fiber. Okay. It's a action potential that generated as an all lung event. You stimulate every acetylcholine release causes a muscle contraction. Okay. So you can see it in more detail right here. Okay, calcium release, muscle contraction. All right. All right. Once the action potentials stop, the calcium release channels close. The calcium gets pumped back inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and then the tropolysis moves back, and all returns to normal. Okay. All right. So let's talk about more about muscle contraction. Okay. These are usually done in muscles where you attach one end of the muscle firmly, and you basically dangle the other end of the muscle, especially with a little weight on it, and you contract the muscle and it pulls up. Okay, so the origin is usually attached firmly, and then you're looking at an insertion. Okay, so a single twitch. Okay, you apply a single stimulus, you get a single muscle twitch. Do you see how the stimulus is shorter than the muscle twitch? This is actually important. Okay, so here I get a muscle twitch right after the stimulus. But if I apply two stimuluses, I can, before this comes all the way down, I can have another twitch that goes up even higher and forces even more contraction than before. Okay, this concept is called summation. So I can add together muscle twitches by stimulus, more and more stimulus, because the stimulus, there's a little gap between the stimulus, but that's much shorter than the gap between twitches. So I can add up, okay, twitches. Okay, you guys heard of tetanus toxin, but what tetanus actually is the complete contraction of muscle. Okay. So if I add more twitches, okay, I can eventually get there, and I can eventually get to where there's no more actual contraction, there's no more shortening of the muscle. It's just as tight as it goes. Okay. So this is incomplete tetanus. You see how there's still slight relaxation of the muscle before it hits this level. Okay. Okay, so if you go all the way to 60 shocks per second, you literally go into complete tetanus, where the muscle's not even moving back and forth any. Okay, it's just there until it fatigues out. Okay. Okay. Tetanus, really, this type of tetanus, this complete tetanus, really doesn't happen in reality. It happens in labs where you can, stimulate. But tetanus in vivo is asynchronous activation of motor units. Okay, so when I contract, I'm not firing every single motor unit I can, even as strong as I can possibly lift. I'm not firing every muscle unit I can. What happens is I keep switching muscle units or motor units, and I keep that contraction. So all the muscle units have some time to relax and contract, and some time to relax and contract. That way, I can keep up for a long period of time. Okay. 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 So trap is this. Okay. As the voltage increases, the number of muscle fibers used in vitro increases. Okay. Okay. You saw that. That's a trap, right? So. Okay. For muscles to contract, they must generate force that is greater than the opposing forces. That's a simple concept of physics, right? If I come with a greater force, then the mass will accelerate in the direction of what I want it to do. If I don't use the greater force, then nothing. Then either nothing happens or force causes the movement in the other direction. Okay. Okay. So Vmax. So that's the velocity. So when you have no force, okay, you can achieve Vmax. That's not actually a reality, right? So that's based on these things. But as you increase load, you lift things up slower. You can lift a 5-pound weight a lot faster than you can move a 50-pound weight. Okay, and then at some point you reach things you can not move, and by that time the contraction is isometric. You're not changing distance, right? You're not moving it. Okay, think about a really heavy table that you can't actually lift. And what will happen to your muscles if you try to lift it? You can contract your muscle, but that bar isn't going anywhere. And so it's isometric. Okay. Okay. There are two types of isotonic contractions. Okay, isotonic contractions are where the contraction shortens or lengthens, but the change is based on just greater than the load. Okay, which means it moves. So a concentric contraction is where a muscle fiber shortens when force is greater than the load. Okay, so if you think. Okay. Okay, so a concentric contraction. I will shorten my muscle fibers here. As I come up, the muscle fibers shorten because the force is greater than load. Okay, now this is an eccentric contraction. I'm slowly lengthening my muscle, so I'm slowly putting it down. Okay, so it's slowly lengthening. So the load is greater than the contraction I'm applying, but it's like I'm still working. I'm still contracting my muscle as I come up or as I go down. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. It allows you to lower a weight gently after a full concentric contraction. So if you think push-ups, the eccentric contraction is the part where you slowly lower yourself to the ground. The concentric contraction is when you push yourself up. Okay. Okay, so the muscles can't shorten because the load is too great. Like if I was pushing against the wall as hard as I can, I'm not moving that wall. Okay. All right. All right. The non-contractile parts of muscle and tendons must be pulled tight when the muscles contract. Tendons, okay, absorb some of the tension. What else? Okay. Okay. Muscle strength is determined by the number of fibers that are recruited to contract, the frequency of the stimulation, the thickness of each muscle fiber. Thicker is stronger. So remember, not sure if Dr. Pula taught you guys this, but the slow twitch fibers are smaller. The fast twitch fibers are bigger. Okay, so thicker, so stronger. Okay, the initial length of the fiber at rest. Okay, so. So here you can see the muscle contraction. Okay, the best part of the muscle contraction is actually in the middle. Okay. Okay, so here you can't really contract, okay, because there's no more contraction, there's no place to go. Here, that when it's fully lengthening out, the myosin can't really grab onto the actin very well, and therefore you don't have any strength to pull. At the middle, you have all the myosin heads working, and you have room to move. Okay. Okay. Let me explain a couple things. Okay. So you exercise, when you start to lift and stuff like that, you get stronger pretty quickly initially, and that a lot of that is the you get more and more muscle fibers to recruit it to contract, and that actually increases lift. Okay, oh wait, you can actually move around. Okay. Okay. Okay, where muscles get their energy. Okay. All right. For rest and mild exercise, we actually burn a little bit of sugar, but mostly fat. Okay. So aerobic respiration and fatty acids. For moderate exercise, we start to burn glycogen. For heavy exercise, we burn blood glucose. And so fat has higher energy levels than sugar, especially per unit weight. The problem with fat is it absolutely requires oxygen. So without oxygen, you are not burning fat ever. You just can't. So when you start to run out of oxygen for like exercising, you start to depend on pure glucose. Okay. All right. As exercise intensity and duration increase, GLUT4 channels are inserted into the sarcolemma to allow more glucose into the cell, so they suck in glucose from the bloodstream. Okay, so you can see here, okay, for mild exercise, the muscle triglyceride and plasma glucose, okay. Okay, so percentage of energy expenditure, a little longer. Moderate exercise, you're burning muscle glycogen, you're burning triglyceride, you're burning fatty acids. Okay, but no, okay, so this is just percentage. Moderate exercise, you're actually burning more fat than mild exercise. Okay, because you're burning more energy, like more of this, or this little bit of this percentage is more than that in sheer number because you're burning more energy. Okay, so this is 130 compared to 65. Okay, so you're burning more energy in medium intensity exercise. Okay, so remember back in the day when you guys used to go to the gym and stuff? Okay, so if you go on those like treadmills or bikes, they have this like fat burning zone. The fat burning zone is the moderate exercise zone. Okay, so for heavy exercise, you're really not burning triglyceride. You're not burning triglycerides and fatty acids anymore. And that's especially true if you like go completely anaerobic. Okay. Okay. But how about some muscle? Okay. So the maximum oxygen intake is called aerobic capacity or VO2 max. Okay. It determines whether you exercise light, moderate, or heavy for a given person. Okay. You can see like how different it is between, like, you know, really hot, like really athletic and not athletic at all people. Okay, so you have also something called a Latinic threshold or anaerobic threshold. This is the extent at which your body starts to shift toward anaerobic metabolism, where all the oxygen you suck in isn't enough, and you start to go anaerobic, and that is the maximum oxygen intake at which the rise in blood lactate levels go up. Okay, it occurs at 50 to 70% of VO2 max because you still need oxygen for other things like your brain function. Okay. Okay, the Latinic threshold means glucose increases during exercise. So you pump more GLUT4 receptors into the plasma membrane, which causes the blood glucose levels to drop. Okay, and the liver produces more glucose through hydrolysis of glycogen, the glycogen storage, and through gluconeogenesis, formation of new glucose. Okay, from other places. Okay, this is one of the reasons why exercise is good for diabetics, okay, because exercise forces more GLUT4 receptors into the muscle. GLUT4 receptors pump up glucose into the muscle even without insulin signaling, okay? So it drops blood glucose levels, okay? Oxygen debt, okay. Okay, oxygen debt, when a person exercises, oxygen is withdrawn from reserves, okay, in hemoglobin and myoglobin, okay. This creates cross bridges in muscle contraction and pump the calcium back in, okay, etc. Okay, so you build lactic acid, and so what happens when you go into exercise, you start having an oxygen debt, okay? And this is especially true for anaerobic exercise. You build up an oxygen debt, okay? You start going anaerobic, okay? You start building lactic acid. After you stop exercising, you have to break down that lactic acid. So that lactic acid is converted back to pyruvate, and then it goes through the oxidative phosphorylation and the citric acid cycle that you guys learned, okay? And that's why the breathing rate continues to be elevated after exercise. You're sucking in more oxygen, okay, to your lungs than you normally do when resting, because you need to pay back the oxygen debt. You need to eventually burn off that lactic acid. Okay. 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 Phosphocreatinine. So your first 10 seconds or so, actually more like 5 seconds or so, are pure ATP. You just burn up all ATP you have muscle. After that, you start needing ATP again. The cellular respiration cycle takes time. You don't have that much time. So when you start generating, you start with a limited supply of phosphocreatine. This is what gets you your ATP initially. Okay, you build up a little bit of ATP that way first before you use the ATP you generate through the citric acid cycle. So first, okay, you use up ATP, and then you use phosphocreatine to create more ATP for muscle contraction. Okay, creatine kinase. Okay, it's an enzyme that's measured in blood samples to aid diagnosis of heart attacks, muscular dystrophy. Okay, it comes from the rupture of muscle. So like heart attacks, cardiac muscle, muscular dystrophy, skeletal muscle, rhabdomyolysis. Okay, I can't talk today. But okay, rhabdomyolysis is a greatly increased concentration of CK in the blood. Okay, that means there's damage to skeletal muscle. Okay. Okay, and there is a difference between the two enzymes. All right, let's finish this. So, okay. So fast twitch and slow twitch fibers. Okay, so there are 3 types of fibers in the body. Okay, fast twitch, slow twitch, and this intermediate fiber. Okay, slow twitch type 1. Okay, slower contraction speed. Okay, the fibers are smaller. They can they can sustain contraction for long periods of time. They have a rich capillary supply. They have more mitochondria. They have more respiratory enzymes, more myoglobin. So you can sustain contractions for longer periods of time. Okay, more mitochondria, more oxygen processing, more capillaries, more blood input. Okay, so what does this look like? This looks like in chickens, this is the dark meat. Okay, so I like to explain this using chickens. Right, there's white meat and there's dark meat on a chicken. This is dark meat on a chicken. Okay, they're found in postural muscles in humans. But if you think about what a chicken is a bird that walks around all freaking day, pecking at the ground. So like their legs are going to be used all the time. And so the muscles that you use all the time, you need to be able to sustain contraction for long periods of time without fatigue. Okay? The reason why they're dark meat actually is because they have more myoglobin and more blood supply, and that when you cook it, makes it darker. Okay? Okay. So these are also like in bodies and stuff, they look redder. Okay. All right. The fast twitch fibers, type 2X fibers, much faster contraction speed, much more force, much they're bigger. Their fibers are bigger, so they're more force. There are fewer capillaries because the muscles are bigger, less mitochondria. So they use glycogen storage, and they're called fast glycolytic fibers. Okay, so these guys are going to be fast twitch, but because they're fast twitch, they also exhaust out a lot faster. Okay, there's fewer mitochondria and stuff coming and less enzymes, so they're burning. They can run out of sugar and fat very quickly. Okay. Okay. The intermediate, okay, type 2A, fast oxidative fibers. These are right in the middle, so they have both the fast switch capacity, but with high oxidative capacity. So they're somewhere in the middle. Okay. Yeah. So comparison of rates to reach maximum tension. Okay. Fast twitch, slow twitch, intermediate twitch. Okay. So here you can see the differences between the two. Okay, cool. So, everybody has a different combination of these. Okay, so people like Usain Bolt, I'm sure you guys probably know who he is, have a muscle profile like this. Okay, this dude is not ever winning a marathon. Okay, this dude, most of his fibers are fast twitch fibers. Or so, yeah, most of his fibers are fast twitch fibers. Okay, so sprinting, you need a bunch of fast twitch fibers to go. Okay, for distance runners, you need things that are slow twitch. Okay, so different sports will have different muscle fibers. So people are just naturally born with a different combination, okay, of muscle fibers. So different people are good at different sports. Okay, like sports where you play in bursts, okay, are going to be like sprinters, okay. Like football players are more world-class sprinter material because the action occurs in like 10 seconds and then you rest, set up, go. But then that go is like maximum go time, okay? As opposed to like soccer players and basketball players where you're constantly running around all day, okay, that's going to be more marathon running, okay? So each, but they'll explain to you later, you can train for each increases in each muscle type. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay. Muscle fatigue is a reduced ability to generate force. Okay. Due to the accumulation of extracellular K+, which reduces the membrane potential. Okay, the depletion of glycogen in the muscle, reduce calcium release. Okay. Okay. Muscle lactic acid accumulation in lower pH. Okay, more acidic. Increase the concentration of free phosphate. Okay. Lack of ATP, and therefore more ADP, etc., etc. Okay, or fatigue of upper motor neurons. Okay. All right, adaptation to endurance exercise training. The increased ability to use fatty acids as fuel and increased intercellular triglyceride storage. Triglycerides have much more energy per unit than glucose. It's more than double. Okay, so the more fatty acid we can use as fuel, okay, the better. Okay, increased lactic threshold, that should be obvious. You can go anaerobic longer. Okay, decrease in type 2X. Okay, so pure fast twitch fiber and increase in intermediate twitch fibers. Okay, decrease insulin sensitivity. Okay, so you can pump in sugar without insulin. Okay, and increase in number of mitochondria. That should be fairly obvious. Okay, mitochondria will skip. Okay, so increase in effective endurance training of skeletal muscles. So read that and then go out for a run. Okay. Okay, the reduced muscle mass, okay, decline with aging. This is a very big deal because as you get older, people stop exercising. People stop exercising. They lose muscle, and they lose muscle and get weaker, and then they and it's a vicious cycle because then they oh, I'm weak, I can't do this, and and then they go, okay, I'm just gonna sit on my ass more, and it just keeps going, and so that ends up in something called sarcopenia, or muscle waste. Okay, this can help with strength training. So even elderly patients should be strength training. Okay, like lift 5-pound dumbbells if that's all you can do. Okay, or 3-pound dumbbells. Okay, reduction in capillary supply. Okay, again can be helped with endurance training. Okay. Fewer cellular cells increase myostatin production. Myostatin inhibits muscle production. If you ever seen those, there's cattle and stuff that don't have myostatin, that have a non-functional myostatin. Just Google that, and you'll be like, okay, that's like a cow on steroids. And you'll see how big those things are. Okay. Okay. So I want to cover. Okay. Adaptation to strength training. Hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is larger cell. Okay, so when type 2 muscle fibers become thicker due to increased amounts of actin and myosin, more sarcomeres. So like when you build muscle, you're not building actin and myosin, you're building entire sarcomeres. Okay, so when you build more and more sarcomeres, the muscle becomes thicker, and eventually one muscle fiber can split into two. Okay. Okay. Muscle atrophy, reduction in size. Okay. When companies is most severe when it results of damage to motor nerves. If I sever the nerve, okay, to your muscles, you atrophy very, very, very quickly. Okay. Okay. The neurogenic entropy might be a result of ALS or trauma, severing the nerve. The disease atrophy is when you're put in a cast. If you have ever been put in a cast before, like take a before picture and an after picture, and you'll be like, what the hell happened? Simply not fighting, not moving your muscles, not getting those twitches, even if you're doing nothing, like you still move your muscles around every day, and that at least gets some work in. If you lock it and don't let it move at all, then you get no work in, and you'll see the difference. Okay. So motor neurons. Okay. Skeletal muscle. Blah blah. Okay. Okay, muscle sensory organs. Okay, muscles are made of muscle cells called interfusal fibers. Okay, and regular muscle fibers called extrafusal fibers. So let me explain. Okay, the Golgi tendon organ and the muscle spindle apparatus. Okay, the Golgi tendon organ responds to the tension that the muscle pulls on a tendon. Okay, so it's located between the muscle and the tendon. The muscle spindle apparatus responds to muscle length, so it's in the middle of the muscle. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so here, okay, you have the gamma fibers, okay, the alpha fibers, the extrafusal fibers, intrafusal fibers, right in the middle. Okay. So you have alpha and recording. Oh, I did record that. Okay. So, okay, you have two types of motor neurons: alpha fiber and gamma fibers. Okay. So alpha fibers contract muscle fibers. Gamma fibers are active stretch fibers. Okay. So contraction of these fibers doesn't shorten the muscle, but increases sensitivity to stretch. Okay. So, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, I was a little. Your book explains it a little differently than other books, which is fine. So alpha motor neurons are the ones that are causing contraction. Gamma motor neurons are stretch fibers. So they measure the amount of stretch. Okay. They also produce enough tension during relaxation to maintain something called muscle tone. Your muscle is never fully relaxed. Okay. You always need them to have a little bit of contraction, and that's provided by the gamma muscle fibers. Okay. 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 So let's talk about the simple reflexes. Okay. Monosynaptic stretch reflex, the simplest reflex. Okay. Um, okay. So single synapse. So here's a single synapse. Okay. I'm sure you guys experienced this before. The little hammer, okay, hits your ligament here. That ligament is then stretched. Okay, the spindle stretch, which activates the sensory neuron here. Okay, the sensory neuron turns around and activates the alpha motor neuron. The alpha motor neuron causes the muscles which causes the muscles to, which causes contraction, which pulls up and kicks out. Okay. All right. So this is a simple reflex. Okay. The way I kind of get students to understand this is to think, what would happen if you did this on quadriplegic? And the answer will still work because none of this involves it going up to the brain. Okay. Okay. So another way of thinking about this, should have explained this. This you kick out before your brain has processed that you've been hit by the hammer. Okay. Okay. Golgi tendon organs. Okay. Okay. So I explain these a little differently. So imagine you were, in a classroom and I told you to hold a book. You hold a book. Pretty easy. If I put another book on you, you can hold the other book. Those changes are mediated by the alpha and gamma motor neurons. The gamma neuron stretch that causes the alpha motor neurons to contract more, so you're holding a heavier thing. Okay? Golgi tendon organs don't care about any of that. What they care about is load. Okay? Now, imagine instead of the book, I put, a 300-pound bench press or bar on you. You can't possibly hold that much in your hand. Okay, some of you can maybe, but I can't. Okay, and so what will happen is you will drop it. You will immediately drop it. Okay, because if you actually tried holding on to that, it will literally rip the muscle off the bone. So you don't want to do that, so you drop it. So that is caused by the Golgi tendon organs. Okay, the Golgi tendon organs are actually inhibitors. They prevent muscle contraction at all, and instead they cause relaxation. They force your muscles to all of a sudden completely relax, and you just drop the bar, and so you prevent your muscles from ripping off the car. Okay, or ripping off the bone. Okay. Okay. The reciprocal iteration, the knee-jerk reflex. Okay, so the knee-jerk reflex is only one limb, but if you step on a nail, what you actually have to do is get that foot off the nail, but then you also have to put all your weight on the other foot. Okay, so that foot you're going to lift up, the other foot you'll plant down harder to withstand the weight change. So you need reciprocal iteration. Okay. Okay. So in this leg, you'll go contract this and relax that. Okay, to make it go down. Then other thing, you're going to go on the other side and do the exact opposite. Okay. So not only do you have to, so when the knee hits the hammer here, this has to contract and your muscles on the other side have to relax, right? The cross extensor reflex is the other side has to do the exact opposite. Okay, the upper motor neuron control is the precentral gyrus. Okay, is where your sensory cortex is. Okay. Okay, cerebellum smooths out the senses. Okay. Okay, so the types of paralysis damage to the lower motor neurons or spinal nerve is flaccid paralysis, reduced muscle tone, depressed stretch reflexes, atrophy, damage to the upper motor neurons or descending tracts, spastic paralysis, increased muscle tone, exaggerated reflexes and hyperactivity. I'm going to put up a link for you guys in a little bit that shows you what exaggerated stretch reflexes look like. Okay. All right. ALS, okay, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a neurodegenerative disorder that affects both lower motor neurons, okay, and upper motor neurons. Okay. All right. Okay. So cardiac and smooth muscles. Cardiac and smooth muscles are involuntary. Okay. Like skeletal muscle, the contraction is due to myosin actin and stimulated by calcium. So they all work the same way on that level. But in skeletal muscle, the regulation is very, very regulated. And cardiac and smooth muscle is not. Especially smooth muscle. I'll explain why in a second. Okay, so in cardiac muscle, okay, these work the same way, but the muscles are actually connected through gap junctions. The gap junctions allow a signal to travel through one muscle cell to another. Okay. So the myocardium is a mass of cardiac cells that are connected to each other via gap junctions. So one action potential of one cell can go through all the cells, and that makes it a single functional unit. Okay, the atria of the heart compose one myocardium. The ventricles of the heart compose another myocardium. So atrial contraction, ventricular contraction. These are independent of each other. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. Okay? Okay. The pacemaker is located, okay, in the heart, in the, it's called the SA node. It's located in the right atrium. Okay? So what actually happens, okay, your heart has a pacemaker in it. That pacemaker is set to beat at about 100 beats per minute. Now, all of you guys are resting in your chairs watching this right now. None of your heart rates are 100 beats per minute. If you are, that tells me there's something wrong with you. Okay. What that signaling is controlled by is the autonomic innervation. Okay, it's being constantly slowed down by your vagus nerve to about 70 or 60. Okay. Okay. So this is all the same thing. And what that causes, okay, is your pacemaker is autorhythmic, so it sets off a signal. That signal causes the atria to contract, and then that signal also eventually goes through the AV node and goes through the Purkinje fibers and causes ventricles to contract. Okay, so lub, dub, lub, dub. Okay, I'm sure we'll get back to it when we talk more about the heart. Smooth muscle, you guys can go through this on your own. It's really, really simple. Okay. Okay. And also, smooth muscle is also autorhythmic, so they have their own rhythm for the most part. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helped a little bit. All right. I'll see you next chapter.